Hello, everyone.
Hey, everybody.
You cannot see us yet.
Joe, can you hear me?
I can hear you very well, Lisa. Thank you.
Awesome.
This is the MMT and the Public Purpose Show, and we are your hosts, Joe Firestone and Lisa Theobald. And tonight we're going to be talking about Social Security and the so called Social Security solvency problem, and Stephanie Kelton's three recent blog posts on the supposed Social Security solvency problem, which all kinds of people use to terrorize other people about how the Social Security fund is going to run out of money. Before we know it, it's going to run out of money unless we do something drastic, such as cutting Social Security benefits or increasing the age at which people can take their Social Security, which is another way of cutting the benefits. And anyway, all I have to say is that there's a problem because the Social Security trust funds are going to go into deficit at some time in the not too distant future, and then we're only going to be to pay out 77% of the benefits that are due to people. So we got to do something about this. And of course, the terrorists only want to do something that's going to hurt people, not something that is going to help people. So before we actually go into the discussion, we have Dolores here. Hi, Dolores. So glad that you are here. Thank you for reminding people to please hit the like button, to subscribe, and to share. That's very important. And Dolores says, hello, everyone. Steve Wolfbrandt is here. Very nice to see you, Steve. And Teresa Sanderson's here. Says, hello, yous guys. Teresa, I didn't know you were from New York. I happen to be from New York. Of course, I'm not from Brooklyn, so I don't say yous guys, but still, that is quite funny.
It is good.
Yeah. And Dolores says, hello, everyone on Facebook. Yeah. Hello, everyone, because Dolores is in two places at once, which, of course, is very good. So thank you all. We will now get into the argument. I've sort of given it kind of an introduction anyway, but the basic idea is those trust funds, which are supposedly going to run out of money. There are good reasons why they're not going to run out of money, but let's look at the first of Stephanie's blog posts. Let me share the screen for that. I know you can't see the screen yet because I haven't put it in. There it is.
Ta-da.
Right there, yes. So this is by Stephanie Kelton on June 30th on her Substack, and the description contains the link to this. What FDR and two former Fed chairs understood about Social Security, and her subtitle, It Ain't About the Money. That's
Right.
what Fed chairs understood, that it ain't about the money. I thought the Fed was all about the money and only about the damn money. Stephanie goes on and says, I've written quite a lot about Social Security over the years. Of course, I come at it from an MMT perspective, which means that I've never worried about the program solvency the way other economists do. Then she points us to the deficit myth, chapter 6, which is the full expression of her views. But she also says that this Twitter thread that we're going to go through, she directs us here to a Twitter thread, which she says will provide a decent summary. But to go on with the post, the Substack post, when it comes to programs like Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid, there's an obsession not shared by MMT economists with, quote, program solvency. It's always about how much money one expects to bring in, mostly in the form of payroll taxes, compared to how much one expects the government to pay out in the form of benefits. When anticipated revenues fall short of anticipated payouts, nearly everyone frets about looming, quote, shortfalls, unquote, and program, quote, solvency, unquote. Shortfalls spell trouble, or so we are told. If you look at the latest report from the trustees of the Social Security Administration, you'll find out where the supposed troubles lie. According to the trustees, Social Security's financial woes are currently confined to the Old Age and Survivors Insurance Trust Fund, the OASI, which is projected to be depleted in 2034. Now, what she means by depleted is that the trust fund is going to shrink to $0 in 2034. After that point, it's going to have to be pay as you go with respect to Social Security, and that is going to cover only 77% of the benefits that are promised, okay, according to the projection of the trustees. The Disability Insurance Trust Fund, however, is considered solvent, quote unquote, for at least the next 75 years. So there's no trouble there at the moment. Nobody's worried about 75 years in the future yet, except perhaps for Bernie Sanders. Anyway, Medicare's hospital insurance, the HI Trust Fund, which pays for hospital services like inpatient care, is expected to face trouble later this decade. Specifically, the trustees project that the HI Trust Fund will be exhausted in 2028, after which point there will only be enough new revenue to cover 90% of anticipated benefits. So that's going to zero out in 2028. Now consider the following scenario. I'm not now going from her article, but just commenting. Specifically, we're in 2028, and let's say, God forbid, that Donald Trump is president in the early part of 2008. Okay. And the trust fund goes to zero. Is Donald Trump going to back saving the trust fund? Okay. Is there going to be a Congress that will do something about the upcoming shortfall? You can go through various kinds of political scenarios when you have a trust fund that seems to be zeroing out, at some time in the future, and the nightmares can look like they're pretty serious. But then, to go away from my comment, Stephanie says, and then there's the outlier, the Supplemental Medical Insurance Trust Fund, that's the SMI. Well, there didn't used to be an SMI, but there has been one since the passage of Medicare Part D, the prescription drug plan passed by George W. Bush and his friends. Unlike all the other programs, the trustees tell us that the SMI fund, quote, is adequately financed into the indefinite future because current law provides financing from general revenues to ensure that any unaddressed, quote, shortfalls, unquote, cannot force benefit cuts. So that's the only one of the trust funds that can dig into general revenues. And that's why there's no projection that it's going to run short of funds in such a way as to force benefit cuts to the prescription drug program. So Stephanie then says, say what? This program isn't just good for the next 75 years, it's good indefinitely. But how? Easy. It's because Congress, okay, a legislative body, bestowed special legislative language on this particular part of Medicare. As the great Northwestern economist Robert Eisner explained almost a quarter century ago, unfortunately, Robert Eisner is no longer with us. Congress could always bestow the same legislative language on Social Security's trust funds or even dispense with the trust funds altogether. Now, is that shocking to some of you?
Oh, I'm sure it is, because a lot of people don't understand that.
That's right. Stephanie says they are, after all, quote, merely accounting entities. When she says they're merely accounting entities, she means there are no dollars in those particular trust funds. There are just some figures developed by the accountants according to some formula. Those numbers don't sit in any bank account. Okay. I'm not sure what the sum is now in those trust funds, but back in 2017 when I blogged about it, there was $2.8 trillion in those particular trust funds. But the $2.8 trillion wasn't in any bank. It wasn't in the Treasury spending account. Okay, it wasn't in any private bank. It was just in these books, in these spreadsheets with numbers on them. Anyway, to go on with Stephanie, instead of fretting over arbitrary numbers on a ledger, Eisner wanted people to understand that Social Security faces no crisis now or in the future. It cannot, quote, go bankrupt. It will be there as long as those who seek to undermine it don't get their political way. So let me underline that. It will be there as long as those who seek to undermine it don't get their political way. Do not get it. That they are not politically victorious. So that but those of us who don't want to see Social Security go bankrupt do get our way. So it's a question of winning a political battle. It's not a question really of getting any particular sum of money. That's not the issue. Ironically, she says, it's the same point here made by MMT economist Alan Greenspan. And she winks at us on the page. She says, okay, we don't claim Greenspan is one of our own, an MMT economist. As a matter of fact, he's much more like an Austrian economist. I'm talking about the Austrian School of Economics here. I'm not talking about the nationality Austrian. But he does get this one right. And more importantly, he gets it right for the right reasons. It's as if those are MMT lenses he's wearing. Listen to him explain to former Congressman Paul Ryan why his obsession with, quote, system solvency isn't the right thing to worry about when you're thinking about the spending capacity of a government that issues a non-convertible floating exchange rate currency. What does non-convertible mean? Well, it means that if you have some dollars, you cannot convert them to anything else, such as gold, such as some other foreign exchange. You can't go to the federal government and get such a conversion. If you bring dollars to the federal government, the only thing you can get in return for those dollars is new dollars from the federal government, the same volume, okay, of dollars from the federal government as you give to the federal government. Now, it used to be back until 1933 when Roosevelt changed that, you were able to trade your dollars in for gold at a fixed rate. You can no longer do that because we have a non-convertible currency. When she says floating exchange rate, it means that on the international exchange, the currency exchanges, the price of the dollar compared to other currencies is allowed to float in that particular market. Okay, so she talks about the money that's issued being non-convertible and that it being traded on international markets where the value, okay, is allowed to float. Okay. Now, there are many nations that don't allow the value of their currency to float. What they do is try to maintain a fixed rate, which is pegged to some other currency. Like some currencies are pegged to the dollar. And what they try to do is to manipulate the value of their currencies in such a way so there's always a ratio to the dollar which is constant. Okay, so they're not allowing the value of their currency to float freely on the market, but in relation to certain other currencies. It always has to maintain a particular ratio to the dollar. It's hard to do that, okay, in international trade, because you have to have the foreign exchange necessary to do that. Sometimes you have to buy your own currency back on the market, okay, in order to do that. Sometimes you have to issue new currency, okay, in order to do that. It's a trick, to be able to do that. It isn't easy. It takes away flexibility in the policy space of those other governments that try to do that. Anyway, going on. Here is Mr. Greenspan. And here's the clip that Stephanie loves to use. Okay, and I will stop sharing what I have been sharing. And I will go to that clip. And I will share that. And we can see Ryan and Greenspan when they have their little dialogue. It's quite short. And it's really quite funny. So let me share that. And let me make sure it's in your stream. I don't think it is quite yet, but there it is. And so here we are again. I'm going to play that.
Today. So having personal retirement accounts is another way of making a future retiree benefits more secure for their retirement. And also, do you believe that personal retirement accounts as a component to a system of solvency does help improve solvency? Because when you have a personal retirement account policy, it's accompanied with a benefit offset. With that feature in place, do you believe that personal retirement accounts can help us achieve solvency for the system? And
okay, so what Ryan wanted to do was to pass in legislation to let people have some kind of personal retirement account in the private sector. And supposedly the profits from those accounts would supplement the money coming in through Social Security and therefore make Social Security more solvent over a period of time. And he was looking for Greenspan to say that the personal retirement accounts were somehow going to do that. And so here's what
Make
Greenspan
those future
said.
retiree benefits more secure.
Well, I wouldn't say that the pay-as-you-go benefits are insecure in the sense that there's nothing to prevent the federal government from creating as much money as it wants and paying it to somebody. The question is,
okay, so I'll stop right there. He says there's nothing preventing the federal government from paying out as much as it likes to anyone. It's the choice of the federal government to do that. So the Social Security benefits are not insecure from the viewpoint of the power of the federal government to actually make those payments. Now, Paul Ryan was not looking to his friend Greenspan for that kind of answer. But that is what he got going on.
how do you set up a system which assures that the real assets are created, which those benefits are employed to purchase?
So what is Greenspan saying there? He's saying inflation is the problem. If the real assets are not there, if the real products of the economy are not there, and you pay those benefits out, then there's going to be an inflation problem. If the products and services are not there to absorb the benefits that have been given to the people. So what he's saying here is he's saying the problem is not solvency. It's the money let out of the government compared to the real resources that are out there, the real products that are out there, the real assets, that are out there. So going on.
So it's not a question of security. It's a question of the structure of a financial system which assures that the real resources are created for retirement as distinct from the cash. The cash itself is nice to have, but it's got to be in the context of the real resources being created at the time those benefits are paid, so that you can purchase real resources with the benefits, which of course are cash.
Mm-hmm.
That's a look at Ryan. So Ryan failed to get the answer that he wanted. He certainly did not get an answer that said that the personal retirement accounts are going to make anything more solvent. And that was the answer he was looking for. And he didn't get it. Okay. So when you ask someone a question who's a witness for you, you want to make sure that you're going to get the answer that you're looking for.
Rule number 1 when you're a lawyer: never ask a question you don't know the answer to.
Or you don't
These
know
are
the answer that you're
lawmakers.
going to get. Yeah,
Right.
that you're going to get. And Ryan did not know the answer that he was going to get. Okay. Now, who was Greenspan? He was, of course, the Federal Reserve Chairman, at that point. So Stephanie says Greenspan was somewhat polite when he said the cash itself is nice to have. He knows that the trust funds are just an accounting construct, that the government doesn't need to maintain a stockpile of dollars in order to meet its obligation to future retirees, their dependents, and the disabled. From the look on Congressman Ryan's face, I'd say he knew it too. It's a shame. More people don't understand the entire debate over solvency, quote unquote, is rooted in a flawed understanding of our monetary system and the mechanics of government finance. As I explained in this thread, okay, that was the Twitter thread she talked about, much of the confusion stems from the way President Roosevelt set up Social Security in 1935. And here she presents a tweet of hers. Let's talk about Social Security, Medicare, and payroll taxes. FDR set up Social Security with a dedicated payroll tax. He reasoned that setting it up this way would help to protect the system from attack. And then she puts in a link to the government archives and then shows us a quote. Quote, we put those payroll contributions there so as to give the contributors a legal, moral, and political right to collect their pensions and their unemployment benefits. With those taxes in there, no damn politician can ever scrap my Social Security program, unquote. That was a quote from FDR.
They're going to try.
And they did try.
And they still do try. And they all tried.
Yes. And they all tried. They've been trying in various ways really since 1980. Okay. They've been trying to terrorize about the future, okay, of Social Security. Anyway, this is a quote from Franklin Roosevelt recalling why Social Security was based on payroll contributions in 1941. Stephanie says, I've seen that quote many times, and I use it in my book, but I didn't realize until this morning, that's the morning of June 30th, that it actually comes from this memo, which she links to, written by Luther Gulick in 1941, who, by the way, was a prominent political scientist in the public administration field, extremely well known at that time and later, all through the 1950s and 1960s, for a textbook he had written with somebody else. So, anyway, going on with Stephanie, I also didn't know that some of FDR's advisors had challenged him on the decision to tie benefits to the payroll tax, or that specifically Mariner Eccles, who served as the chairman of the Federal Reserve during the Roosevelt period, all through that period, Mariner Eccles, is generally considered the finest chair of the Federal Reserve, okay, in history. The Board of Governors building in D.C. is named after him, okay. He led the Federal Reserve collaboratively with the administration all through the 1930s, okay, and I believe up until it was either 1948 or 1950. I forget the exact date, okay, that he retired. But he was an outstanding head of the Federal Reserve who really understood the money, the spending issues, the taxation issues, what taxation is for, what spending, okay, is for. He was miles beyond the understanding of Jay Powell, for example, who's serving now as the chair of the Federal Reserve. Anyway, he urged the Roosevelt administration to abandon its push to expand Social Security benefits during World War II. And I'd never seen anyone reproduce the last sentence from the memo by Gulick. So Gulick said, I suggested that it had been a mistake to levy these taxes in the 1930s when the Social Security program was originally adopted. Of course, there was a typo there. FDR said, I guess you're right on the economics. This is a quote from FDR. Quote, I guess you're right on the economics. They are politics all the way through. We put those payroll contributions there so as to give the contributors a legal, moral, and political right to collect their pensions and their unemployment benefits. With those taxes in place, no damn politician can ever scrap my Social Security program. But then the final sentence, those taxes aren't a matter of economics. they're straight politics, unquote. FDR understood exactly what he was doing. He was making a political judgment. He was not necessarily correct for all times and places, but he was probably correct for the middle of the 1930s when he passed the Social Security plan, of course, and also he was probably right at the time of the Second World War, too. Stephanie says, I got to thinking about all this again after learning that Senator Bernie Sanders, the independent of Vermont, recently introduced the Social Security Expansion Act, which aims to make Social Security solvent for the next 75 years, quote unquote. And then she says, I'll have more to say on all of this but tomorrow. So that's the first of the 3 blog posts. So let us move on from that and go to the second of the blog posts. Now, she is consciously creating over 3 days 3 blog posts that would be short, but if you read all 3, you would have a fairly deep understanding of Social Security funding. That's what she intended. So let's get to the second of those blog posts. And that too is more about the understanding, okay, of Mariner Eccles and why he was opposed to Social Security. It wasn't because he was opposed to Social Security, as you'll see. Anyway, going to back to the beginning of this. I haven't actually put it into the stream yet. Here it is in the stream. Okay, in my stream. Okay, here it is in the beginning. Why did FDR, as Fed chair, why did he oppose his plan to expand Social Security? So, this other piece from her lens, from her Substack, is a follow-on to the one she published the day before on June 30th. This is dated July 1st. Yesterday's post, I wrote about the near universal obsession with program solvency and the idea we need to deal with looming shortfalls in order to protect Social Security and Medicare Part A for future generations. She says, in one sense, that is true. Under current law, OASI, DI, and HI are authorized to pay statutory benefits, i.e., what beneficiaries are entitled to under the law, only if there are adequate financial resources to cover those obligations. Well, what does she mean by that? Specifically, that there are adequate financial resources in the accounting record. Of course, there are really no financial resources in the accounting record. But what she's saying is they cannot pay out the benefits if the accounting record says that there is not enough money, that the accounting record is not sufficiently positive to cover the benefits that Social Security has to pay out. So theoretically, then, there could be a situation, she's saying, where Congress appropriates the funds for Social Security, which it does every year, has to do every year a new appropriation. Okay. But even though it has a new appropriation, okay, but that appropriation is greater than what is accounted for in the trust funds, then the law doesn't allow, supposedly, the government to spend what Congress has appropriated, even though Congress's appropriation is a mandate for spending. Supposedly, the current law still prevents the spending from taking place, okay, if the trust funds have a balance that is less than the appropriation. So to go on. Right now, Social Security, OASDI, provides benefit payments to about 65 million people. Without legislative action to address the near-term shortfalls facing the OASI, again, she mentions 2034 and 2028, the operating constraints implied by the specific text of the enabling legislation will essentially force the government to at least partially default on these promises. I'm not so sure about that, but we will see. So you can see why someone like Senator Bernie Sanders has recently introduced legislation that aims to make Social Security solvent for the next 75 years. But he's not trying just to eliminate the long-term financing shortfall. He also wants to expand the benefits to current and future retirees. Here's how he describes the goal of his Social Security Expansion Act. It would make Social Security solvent for the next 75 years. It would expand benefits for seniors and people with disabilities by $2,400 a year. Hey, that's great. Love that. And increase COLAs, cost of living adjustments, which would lift millions of seniors out, of poverty. So that's certainly a very good thing in the Social Security Expansion Act from Bernie. As you might expect, says Stephanie, he proposes to, quote, pay for these changes by raising taxes on high-income individuals. He says, today, absurdly and unfairly, there's a cap on income subject to Social Security taxes, which is just $147,000 a year. That means if you're a multi-billionaire, you pay the same amount in Social Security as someone making $147,000 a year. It means if you make $147,000 a year or less, you pay 6.2% of your income in Social Security taxes. But if you make 10 times more, $1,472,000, you pay just 0.62% of your income in Social Security taxes. That may make sense to someone. It doesn't make sense to me, says Bernie. Our legislation applies a Social Security payroll tax to all income, including capital gains and dividends. For those who make $250,000 a year, the wealthiest 6.4% of Americans. Under this bill, 93.6% of households would not see their taxes go up by 1 penny. Steph says, the bill isn't going to pass. And one wonders whether President Biden would sign it if it did, given his repeated promise not to raise taxes on anyone making less than $400,000.
But then he did it anyway.
But the clock is ticking even louder with the Hospital Insurance AI Trust Fund. So something will eventually need to be done legislatively if cuts are to be avoided. So this then is the question. What has to be done by the legislature if cuts are to be avoided? I'm not sure that's so clear. It is easy to understand why Senator Sanders, along with 7 co-sponsors in the Senate, 22 in the House, feel an urgent need to expand benefits. And I should add here, it's certainly true that what Senator Sanders wants to do would be something legislatively that would do something about these particular trust funds. But that's only one thing that could be done to remove this particular problem. At a time when half of older Americans have no retirement savings and are worried about their ability to retire with dignity and millions of seniors are living in poverty, I believe that our job is not to cut Social Security. Our job must be to expand Social Security. Every senior citizen in America can retire with the respect they deserve, and every person with a disability can live with the security they need. According to the most recent data, 12% of seniors are trying to live on an income of less than $10,000 a year, while 55%, which is majority, are trying to survive on less than $25,000 a year. Think about that. How do you pay the rent, put food on the table, and pay for the basic necessities of life on just $10,000 or $25,000 a year? The answer is many cannot. In the richest country in the world, that is a national disgrace. Yeah, okay. And I could tell you, Bonnie and I could not survive on less than $25,000 a year. We're fortunate in that our Social Security benefits total more than $25,000 a year, and we also have some supplementary sources of income. Not very great, but there is some supplement. But I can tell you this: we struggle. We do struggle. From the economic standpoint, this is not a happy time for us. It may be a very happy time in many other ways, but it is not a happy time economically. I can tell you that. Times are tough for millions of Americans right now. We're paying substantially more for basic necessities like food and gas. We're drawing down savings, Stephanie, and reaching for credit cards to help pay the bills. Nearly half of families with kids say they can't afford enough food now, that the child tax credit, the CTC, has ended. That part of the American Rescue Plan that was made temporary for some reason. I still don't understand that. I don't understand. There was a perfect opportunity there to make the child tax credit simply a permanent thing, but the Democrats thought it was better political strategy not to do that.
How?
I'm sorry.
What do they? Please tell me
I'll try.
that they're not doing that. Please tell me that. Okay, hold on. Let me just say this right out. Do they think that they are catering to a Republican vote by doing this?
I don't know if they think they're catering to a Republican vote. When they did this, I think they somehow thought that if they did not make it permanent in the ARP, that there would be an incentive to make it permanent when they shifted over to the Build Back Better Act. Okay, if you recall, in the original architecture of Joe Biden's program, he had these three parts. He had the rescue plan. He also had the American Family Plan, and he also had the infrastructure plan. But the other two bills for the other two plans were never passed, and he was saving the permanent part of that for the American Family Plan. Okay, which of course, that was something that was chopped to pieces by the conservatives, by Nancy Pelosi, by Chuck Schumer, and by the Republicans. They all participated in getting rid of the American Family Plan, basically. Okay, and watering down the infrastructure plan until it was a ghost of its original self, and half of it, was then way to contributors. Okay, so anyway, maybe that's what they thought. At the time, but it was one of these really, really stupid things, miscalculations, strategically, that Democrats do.
I just feel like they've tied their politics into such pretzels that even they don't know how to make any sense out of it.
I think so too.
I mean, I really think that's what's going on, Joe, because none of it makes any sense anymore.
I know it doesn't make sense from a political point of view. If you want to get your people elected in 2022, you do not pass a temporary CTC, because people will just forget about it by November of 2022, or will be even more angry because you gave them something and then you took it away by making it temporary.
Yeah, but Joe, they just plunged all those kids back into poverty.
Yes, they did.
I mean, what in God's name are they thinking?
Well, they are. I hate to say it, given my own age, but I mean, some of them are not at their full capacity any longer.
Well, okay, there's that. And then
There's,
I would lay wages on the idea of how many actual senators understand this stuff.
oh yeah, I would also.
And how many in the Congress, even fewer, smaller, single digits maybe. But they sure pontificate on it like they know what the hell they're talking about, and they sound like idiots to those who do understand it. And
Yes,
yet nobody, what we need is somebody either in the Fed to stop talking in street speak when they get to a microphone and just be honest with people. I mean, everybody is, oh, I just answered my own question. I forgot. Holy crap. It's the donors.
it's the donors. Holy crap!
It's the donors talking. How stupid of me. Okay. I mean, you want to talk about a clown show.
Yeah, this is a clown show. That was certainly a big piece of the clown show. So Stephanie goes on and says millions of seniors are facing one of the largest ever Medicare premium hikes for the remainder of 2022. Okay, that hike is something like, I guess $40 a month or something like that. Okay, I don't think that we're going to go broke for $40 a month. But okay, are we going to get angry over $40 a month if we know why that premium hike occurred? The reason for the premium hike is that they were negotiating, the administration was, with I forget which of the drug companies to buy the new, the Alzheimer's drug that they were marketing. Okay, at that time, and that Alzheimer's judge was supposed to be so expensive that it was going to require this particular premium hike.
Oh, please give me a damn break.
Okay,
This
so
this
then
stuff
of
makes me
course,
so angry.
they found out that the Alzheimer's drug did not work. So they backed off on buying as much of the Alzheimer's drug as they originally planned to buy. But guess what? They kept the largest ever premium hike in place for the remainder of 2022 anyway. Why did they do that? I mean, that's enough to make people who know the score on this just furious.
Because of the
Basically,
donors.
because
Because
of
the donors write this stuff in there, and the donors bought the politicians a long time ago. So if the politicians want to keep their donor support, which of course they do, because hey, let's face it, guys, it's not us that they're worried about. This is what they do. Because if they can run enough ads and hit enough people in the general population who really don't pay attention or have the time or even care about this stuff because it's all crap anyway.
yeah,
They're,
the thing, though. That's the thing. Yes, you can fool all of the people some of the time.
some of the people quite a bit of the time, but you can't
Yes,
fool all the people all the time.
all the time. And that is still true. It may be harder than ever for people to see through to the truth. But since you're doing all these crazy and evil things all the time, some percentage of the time, people are going to catch you up and they're going to get very, very angry. And in fact, I'm sure that explains the general level of anger and frustration on the part of the American people because these kinds of things are going on all the time. Anyway, it makes perfect sense that Senator Sanders and many of his colleagues are looking for ways to offer some relief. It's actually reminiscent of something FDR proposed in 1943 when inflation was running hot during World War II. It was running at 6.1%.
Now, this is amazing. These next few paragraphs are mind blowing.
They're amazing, aren't they? Yeah.
They're mind blowing.
Yeah.
You want to talk about twisting yourself into a pretzel? Man, oh
Like
man.
Senator Sanders, FDR wanted to provide some relief. So his administration proposed an expansion of Social Security benefits with additional revenue coming from the payroll tax. Specifically, he sought a payroll tax of 12%, shared equally between workers and their employers. It would have raised the employer contribution from 4% to 6%, and it would have increased the rate paid by workers from 1% to 6%. That was a long time ago. Workers had to pay only 1%. Boy, things have changed. So Eccles, the chairman of the Fed at the time and the man for whom the Federal Reserve building is named, was strongly opposed. I learned of his history just yesterday when I stumbled on the following letter that Eccles sent to an official at the Treasury Department on September 7, 1943. He was clearly distressed by the administration's proposal, and he articulated a number of reasons why he considered it, quote, a serious tactical error to link the Social Security programs with the current revenue proposal. One of his big concerns was inflation. Congress had been working on legislation aimed at generating revenue as part of a stabilization program. You see, back then, lawmakers actually understood that the purpose of their proposed tax hikes was to help manage inflationary pressures, not to generate revenue per se. And the public understood it too. By pushing for an expansion of Social Security alongside proposed increases in the payroll tax, Eccles worried that the administration would be sending mixed signals to the population. Boy, the World War II population must have been awfully sophisticated.
No, they just didn't get lied to on a regular basis.
That was very insightful, Lisa.
Well, I mean, that's the problem. We're propagandized to the point where, you know, people are dumb because they feed us dumb stuff. That's what's going on.
Because they see this dumb stuff, and I guess they weren't getting this dumb stuff from the Roosevelt administration.
No, it was illegal to. It was used to be illegal to propagandize the American people.
And as we know, it is no longer illegal.
No, it's not.
He wrote, the major task before Congress is to provide promptly for a substantial amount of additional revenue needed to assure the success of the stabilization program. If the Social Security proposal were introduced as part of the revenue program, this basic issue would be lost sight of. The public, which has come to understand the need for increased taxes as a means of inflation control, would find it more difficult to see how an expansion of the Social Security program at this time would serve the same purpose. He further worried that it would delay passage of the bill, thereby jeopardizing efforts at managing inflationary pressures, as various factions spent months debating the more controversial provisions. He was looking ahead to the post-war period. In 1943, he was looking ahead to the post-war period, and he advised the administration to, quote, think carefully, unquote, about preserving the link between Social Security and the payroll tax. He ended the letter with these words: it appears very doubtful whether the financing of the enlarged program should even at the outset rely exclusively upon payroll taxes and not be given some support from the general budget. In other words, like the SMI program that we talked about earlier, it's partly funded through payroll taxes, but where payroll taxes cannot meet the burden of that, that program can dig into general revenue, and therefore it is never considered as something that could have a solvency problem.
Other
Okay,
funding as necessary. That's the amendment that we need.
Something like that. There are a number of different things we could do, and one of the things that I'd like to discuss here as we go forward is to talk about some of these other things. Some of them are so trivial, it's just incredible.
It is incredible, but I will say one thing though. Um, it's funny how history circles back around. The very thing that um, he was concerned about here and he's writing about is what happened to Bernie with the
Yep,
amendment.
yep,
It's exactly what happened to Bernie with the amendment.
right. So a payroll tax as high as 12% might prove a severely depressing factor in the post-war economy, whether the burden was shifted to the employees in the form of lower wages or to the consumers in the form of higher prices. This point should be weighed carefully before adopting a 12% payroll tax, which would promise to become a rigid element in the post-war federal tax structure. Eccles wasn't opposed to the expansion of Social Security. Indeed, he lauded the program, calling it, quote, a vital importance to the nation. But he thought there were better ways to get there. I should add at this point, I suppose, that Eccles was a Republican, but from Utah. So Roosevelt appointed to head his Federal Reserve a Republican, but from Utah.
Yeah, we work with a former Republican from Utah on healthcare, single
Yes,
payer healthcare. We have a
yes,
lot in common with FDR right now when it comes to
yes,
policy and conservatives.
yes, we do. And his name is Dr. Joe Q. Jarvis.
Dr. Jarvis,
Dr. Jarvis.
indeed.
But of course, uh, here we have, okay, an earlier Mormon from Utah who thought that Social Security was of vital importance to the nation. But he thought there were better ways to get there. And he wanted to see Congress preserve its inflation fighting credibility with the public.
Is
Stephanie?
that because there's just, see, I'm a big believer in just giving people the frickin' truth and explain it.
Yep.
You should be able to encapsulate it in talking points that are succinct enough to explain. And
To explain,
right,
but you have to tell them the truth. And you
yeah.
have to see that they understand the truth. Because if they don't understand the truth, then they just won't understand the problems that may arise.
Yeah, okay. So you put an audience out there and you do what they do now, only you use truth. You seed the audience with questions that the general public might not understand, and then you get the news networks to listen in and then explain it further after the fact. But see, you would have to tell people the truth. And you know what's wrong now, Joe? Nobody knows what the hell the truth is anymore because everybody's lying.
That's true. We just were walking in the front room here today, sitting around and socializing with some neighbors. And we walked in on the conversation. Okay, one of the neighbors was saying, they all lie
Mm-hmm.
all the time. It's all lies. It was, in connection with what the FBI was saying over the Trump raid. And this woman was saying, well, they lie. They never tell you the truth. Unfortunately, that's where we've come to today, not just with respect to the FBI, but so many other institutions.
Everything.
We think the institutions lie. We think the politicians lie. We think everybody is lying all the time.
It's really sad.
Not just sad. It's a certain amount of honesty is a necessary condition for democracy to survive. And one of the reasons why our democracy is threatened, I think, is because that honesty is not there anymore.
Yeah.
Anyway, Stephanie ends by saying, I'll have a little bit more to say on this topic tomorrow. Thanks for reading. Tomorrow, of course, is the next one of these posts of hers. was done on July 2nd.
Save Social Security from
Yes.
its saviors.
Save it from its saviors, which is a title that she, quote, stole, but of course she didn't really steal it. She deliberately used it, and she acknowledged that the title was from an article by the aforementioned Professor Eisen, Robert Eisen. And here we go. He was one of our favorite writers. So here we are. I haven't put this into the stream yet, have I? No. I'm beginning to remember whether I put something in the stream or not.
Yay. It's a habit, right? It's a habit.
It's a habit. And the habit is now there. Save
Mhm.
Social Security from its, quote, saviors, unquote. So she says, lately I've been writing about Social Security here and here, which are the references to the first two of the articles we went through. With everything else that's commanding our attention at the moment, it's not a topic that feels particularly urgent. It soon will. Now, here she's saying something very significant. She points out the fact that the debates have already started, and I expect them to heat up after the midterms. Just think back to what happened after the midterm shellacking of the Democrats in 2010, when a newly emboldened group of Republican lawmakers joined forces with a group of so-called moderate Democrats, quote unquote, to push for cuts to Social Security as part of a, quote, grand bargain. What she hasn't said in this paragraph, of course, is that one of the moderate Democrats was, guess who?
Hmm.
President Barack
Joseph.
Obama.
Oh, well, Biden did this too. But
Yeah.
Obama did this? I don't remember
Oh
this. I
yes,
missed it.
yes. Obama was part of the grand bargain from the beginning, more than Biden. More than Biden was. Okay, it was Obama who made the deal with the Peter G. Peterson Foundation for them to contribute to forming a fiscal commission. That fiscal commission, which was trying to create the grand bargain, help him to do that. That was funded by the Peter G. Peterson Foundation
So
because
let's
they couldn't
just
get Congress to fund it.
let's just not forget that Medicare and Medicaid services, Medicare and Medicaid, both of those programs are a result of the Social Security Act.
Yes,
So
yes,
doesn't this all just make all kinds of sense? I missed this piece of this puzzle, but it makes perfect sense. I just didn't know it was so goddamn blatant.
yes. Okay, so they were trying for the grand bargain then in uh, as soon as they won Congress in the election of 2010, they came in 2011. And from the first day, January of 2011, they were pushing for cuts to Social Security as part of a grand bargain. And they had a partner in the Obama administration in this. Okay, so the progressives were fighting a war from the start to try to head off these cuts. Of course, says Stephanie, no one ever comes right out and says they want to cut Social Security. That would be political suicide. Instead, lawmakers, Democrats and Republicans, describe their positions as well intentioned and grounded in the harsh reality of budgetary math. They want to save Social Security. And so that's where the title comes from. I have to point out, okay, at this point, as well, that what Stephanie is suggesting here is that this old fight for the grand bargain, which was never quite concluded, this is going to arise again if Democrats lose. Uh, if they lose the elections for Congress in 2022. She's persuaded that in 2023, there's going to be a big push for another grand bargain to cut or privatize Social Security or do various other things, not just to Social Security, to Medicare, okay, and to Medicaid too. That if they win, they're going to come back strong with this stuff. And they're going to also elect some nuts to Congress who are out front saying they want to get rid of Social Security. I mean, this is
Twisted.
happen.
This is just twisted. This is so twisted. It's disgusting. She does a great job of putting this all together.
Oh, she does, and she does a great job of mixing the economics with the politics.
Well, yeah, I don't know how you don't.
Well, of all the MMTers, she's the one right now with the most experience in mixing the economics with the politics. Because of the time she spent in Washington, spent in Congress, and the time she spent serving Bernie, and then all the writing she's done since then, which has kept herself completely immersed in politics. At the recent conference, okay, at Levy, but she gave a keynote speech. A lot of the keynote speech, okay, was about debates going on, okay, in Washington, and the various conversations she had where the MMT views of what to do about the economy were being considered, okay, and were when the policymakers talked about it, they contrasted the MMT view with the neoclassical view. Okay, and I don't think they were particularly fair to the MMT view or really understood the MMT view. But the significant point here is that it was a part of the deliberations. It was at the table in some way. It was a factor they thought they had to take into account in thinking through what they were going to do about the inflation and the current economic situation going into the election season. And so they formulated their strategy and their policies with some of what MMT had to say in the back of their minds. Not necessarily yet for any sort of positive outcome, but at least the MMT perspectives were part of the discussion and not completely ignored. And that is a big change for DC. And it also showed how the thoughts of Stephanie Kelton herself were being considered, the influence her book has had on the thinking of people in Washington. Now, not necessarily convincing yet, not necessarily
Well,
where
I
we
mean,
want to
Joe,
be.
I think that what she's doing and what we all have to do, but we have to move much more quickly, is that we have to keep shouting these things, because the reason that they're not going to get bought right now is that they are political suicide for about 85% of everybody in office right now. If everybody in the public understood that if we raise taxes on the rich and the wealthy and we tax capital gains, that we could tamp down inflation like that, okay? Imagine what would happen with all of the talking points. They would be obliterated if we could get people to understand this, right?
Yes.
All of this garbage about Social Security not being solvent. No, we just explained to everyone that basically what you have there is an accounting record, right?
Yes, you have an accounting record.
It
Exactly.
doesn't. What the problem is that they haven't put it into the budget, and I don't even know if the term is discretionary, but they have to appropriate the funding. They have to agree to it, right?
Yes, they have to appropriate the funding for Social Security each year.
Right. So instead of it making it mandatory, which comes back to what they pulled with the Veterans Act initially, the Democrats wanted to make it mandatory funding every year instead of having it to go through Congress to be appropriated every year. And that's what the Republicans pitched a fit about. Now, in the end, I don't know if they took that out or not because they passed the Veterans Bill.
They passed the Veterans Bill, but I think the money for it still has to be appropriated every year.
So it's discretionary. So they took out the guarantee.
Well, I'm not sure. In other words, there are ways to guarantee it in such a way that there are still appropriations every year. Okay, basically what you do is you appropriate it, okay, a year ahead based on projections.
Yeah, but you still have the obstructionism that's going to that's a hurdle you got to get over every freaking year. And if we lose the House or the Senate, what do you think's going to come up next?
And what I think
these
is going to come up is cuts. Okay,
that's exactly it.
That's what's going to come up. Okay, so in 1998, Eisen published an article called, quote, "Save Social Security from Its Saviors." She says, "I strongly encourage you to read the entire thing," which she links to here, by the way. In addition to that article, he wrote a number of books and op-eds about Social Security. I happen to have one myself, as a matter of fact. He was frustrated by the policy debates. I have two of his books, actually, which he saw as entirely misguided. Here's the closing sentence from an op-ed he published in the Wall Street Journal, 1997. "Politicians and pundits should stop playing games with the confused public and focus on total spending and total taxes and how they affect the economy, who gains and who loses." Now that's common sense, isn't it? If you go on to read the article I recommended, you'll see that Eisner echoes this little known fact, okay, by MMTers like Warren Mosler. And here's a statement, okay, from Warren from Twitter. "The Social Security trust funds are the accounting record of the difference between dollars subtracted from workers' accounts and dollars added to the accounts of the beneficiaries. There is nothing, quote, in them or, quote, not in them. Constraints on spending are entirely political," says Warren, in plain language. Eisner's main message was that the obsession with Social Security trust funds, OASI and DI, is a distraction. To borrow a phrase from Gertrude Stein, quote, "There is no there," unquote. "The trust funds exist merely as accounting entities. We don't need them to carry a positive balance or any balance whatsoever in order to preserve Social Security for future generations." Here is Eisner, quote, "Expenditures alleged to be related to trust funds are often less than their income. Witness the highway and airport funds as well as Social Security. There is no particular reason they cannot be more than their income. The accountants can just as well declare the bottom line of the fund's accounts to be negative as positive, and the Treasury can go on making whatever outlays are prescribed by law. The Treasury can pay out all that Social Security provides while the accountants declare the funds more and more in the red. The only conceivable problem, as I explained last week," says Stephanie, "is with the way the enacting legislation was written. Congress could fix Social Security simply by amending that the legislation to grant the old age and survivors insurance and disability insurance programs the same federal backstopping that already guarantees program solvency for the Supplemental Medical Insurance, the SMI Trust Fund. If for some reason we choose to perpetuate the myth that the trust fund balances are vital to the program solvency," then Eisner had this to say: "For those concerned, nevertheless, about the solvency of the trust funds, there are simple, painless remedies for this accounting problem." what he strongly opposed were the kinds of remedies that are often proposed in the name of saving Social Security, such as means testing, raising the retirement age, reducing cost of living adjustments, diverting payroll contributions into privatized accounts, etc., like the Paul Ryan thing, diverting payroll contributions into personal retirement accounts.
Yeah, because that won't raise inflation. Oh my gosh, this is so insidious.
Yeah. The proposed nibbling away of Social Security, this is a quote again from Eisner, including that by some of its presumed friends is disingenuous and misleading. Even some of its defenders seem all too ready to accept minor cuts in benefits to achieve prospective fund balance. Eisner might have tweaked an old adage, quote, with saviors like these, who needs executioners, unquote. And there's kind of a diagram of Social Security with the Democrats chipping away, and the Republicans hammering away, blam, 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 with a mallet.
And why? All to keep the people down.
All to keep the people down. Absolutely to keep the people down. Okay, so I made some contributions to this discussion myself. I'm not saying that I had any, specific effect on what Stephanie said, because I have no idea whether she ever read my stuff on this. But I had two pieces I did in December of 2017, on my website, and there are links here to it. Okay, I
And one
think.
in 2005, I think, right?
No, I didn't write about this in 2005. I have
Oh, okay.
two things in December of 2017. I'll put the first one up right now. Sharing it. Share the screen.
Joe, I'm going to go off camera, but I will be able to hear you and you can hear me.
Okay, fine. Thanks. So here it is. I hope I have the right one. Let's see. Okay. Yeah. That picture of me in the center. Just below it is the article. Can Medicare and Social Security pay out full benefits if Congress appropriates the funds needed for full payouts, even if the, quote, trust funds, unquote, have reached a zero? So I'm raising the key question there. Let's say the trust fund runs to zero. Can the government keep on paying out the full benefits anyway? Keeping in mind the federal government cannot involuntarily, quote, run out of money because of its constitutional money creating capacity, then the answer to the question in the title is, quote, of course it can. But whether or not it does in the end, but whether or not it does is in the end up to Congress choosing to appropriate the spending required. So I'm saying here that it's the appropriation that counts, even if the trust fund is at zero. Right now, given our current fiat currency system and how federal spending occurs in general, entitlement spending for Medicare and Social Security occurs through marking down the, quote, trust fund security accounts, marking up the Treasury spending accounts, and then marking down those same accounts, that is the Treasury spending accounts, when the entitlement payouts to the private sector occur. In other words, the Social Security checks sent to you and me. Congress, according to the SS legislation, doesn't allow the Treasury to spend on entitlements when the spending cannot be covered by balances in the trust funds that can be marked down. This may sound a little complicated, but I think it's a pretty precise statement this last paragraph of what goes on in terms of marking up and marking down these accounts. Then I raise the question. However, what if Congress appropriates full benefit payouts for Social Security and Medicare when the trust funds fall to zero? Then I say, then those appropriations will, in effect, constitute repeal of the prohibition against payouts without trust fund balances to draw against with new mandated spending. So, what I'm specifically saying, it's Congress. They know the previous law that you're not supposed to do any payouts when the trust funds fall to zero. What I'm saying here is that if you know this and you still make an appropriation mandating spending, that from a legal point of view, that new appropriation when the trust fund is at zero constitutes a repeal of the prohibition against making any payouts. Why do I say that? Because an appropriation is a mandate for the Treasury Department to spend on something. So it means the Congress must be fully conscious that even though the trust fund is at zero, it's still going to mandate those payouts. I then say it would then be up to the Treasury to generate the credits in its spending accounts to make those payments. Okay, so let's ask what I'm saying here. When Congress makes an appropriation, this is a mandate to spend. It's an order for Treasury to spend. So, if the Treasury Department understands that it's gotten an order from Congress, even if those trust funds has fallen to zero, it can interpret the appropriation as saying, ignore those trust funds. They're only accounting records. Make the payouts anyway. I'm saying the administration, whatever administration is in power, can choose to adopt this particular interpretation. Now, if you don't think that this particular interpretation is enough, you'd like a little more protection, then one other thing that could be done, okay, is to add a phrase, okay, is to say, but this appropriation constitutes a repeal of the aspect of the Social Security Act that says that you cannot make payouts when the trust funds fall to zero. That is an exceedingly brief statement which can be made by the Congress confronting a trust fund that has fallen to zero. It's just a sentence that has to be added. But it's also true that Congress can use a variety of methods to actually execute. The Treasury Department can use a variety of methods to execute the appropriation from Congress. That is, it can use tax revenues that come in. It can use revenues from debt instruments. It can use revenues from seigniorage, coin seigniorage. It can use revenues from perpetual bond sales and other methods that are reviewed in other places elsewhere. What I'm referring to here, okay, is my book on platinum coin seigniorage. But make those payments it must, since they are mandated by the congressional appropriations. So then I say, an awful lot of money in political communications effort is being spent on both a largely faux national deficit debt crisis and a largely faux, that's FAUX, entitlement crisis. Both of these are often represented by media pundits, reporters, and politicians as projected financial problems, but in actuality are present and projected political problems which need not persist or occur. In fact, the so called deficit problem is not that our deficits are too large, but that they are too small. We know that because we still are not at true full employment, and also because our trade deficits are roughly the same size as our fiscal deficits. Okay, in other words, trade deficits are a drain from the private sector. Fiscal deficits are an addition to the private sector. When the two are equal,
It's a wash.
it's a wash, but there's no additional money going into the private sector. So the government deficit is not sufficient to give additional money to the private
To the
sector.
private sector.
There's no
Yes.
profit for the private sector if the trade deficits are roughly the same size as the fiscal deficits. Oh, by the way, the Biden administration right now seems to be getting into the position where the trade deficits are roughly the same size as the fiscal deficits because he's been reducing the fiscal deficits too much, far too much.
And this whole explanation that you just went through, Joe, is why we say, and it is true, that Congress holds the purse strings.
Congress
And
holds.
that is why it is so important that we have a Speaker of the House that allows the politics of all representatives and the power.
Sorry, what happened here? What happened? The broadcast is not ended. Can people hear me? I'm not sure what has happened to the broadcast. But okay, I see that Lisa has gone off. I don't know. It's something's happened to Lisa's microphone. Let me see. No, I'm not able to unmute. Okay, Lisa, you have muted your microphone. Now you're unmuted, but I still can't hear you. I don't know why. But Lisa was in the middle of saying something very important. I would love to hear her get back. Okay, I think the best thing is for you to go out and come in again, and that might fix it. No, still not working. Okay, folks. So while Lisa was appropriately cut off, I have to remind you.
Can you hear me, Joe? No.
We got you. Okay, keep going then.
Sorry.
You were cut off in the middle. Hello, Lisa. Our sound keeps.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you now. Lisa, you there again? She keeps on cutting in and out. Yeah, she has to come in again, I think. Okay, so I'll wait for her to get back in. Wait, here, get back in. She's coming again. Let me let her in.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I hear
Okay.
you now. I think it's okay.
So what I was trying to get at here is if we have the appropriate function of the House where all of the caucuses have their representation and they are free or they take the initiative to wield the power they possess to do things like force a vote. Yes, I said that awful phrase, where we have representation that was sent to Congress to do things like say, we have enough votes that if you want our vote to be Speaker of the House, we need some concessions. Here's the list of demands, right? What we have right now, Joe, and this is why it is just so important for people to understand this. Congress holds the purse string. All of this explanation that Joe is going through with the article that he wrote in 2017 is premised on this. If Congress says that you must appropriate, we will appropriate funding, and they vote on it and it passes to cover Social Security, the old age security,
The old age survivors trust fund.
survivors insurance, and the health care, the disability, all of that. If Congress votes on it, then the money's going to come. The money is going to get appropriated. If we have to run a deficit for it, fine. However, we need to do that. Taxing the wealth is another way to get everybody in line and get everybody on board. But what we've got right now are a bunch of centrists that are willing to make another grand bargain. And I'm going to tell you right now, Joe, I hate to say this out loud, but if we don't keep the House, we're screwed.
Yep.
We are screwed.
We have to keep the House, or there is going to be a full-blown attack on Social Security and Medicare, okay, and the safety net. A full-blown attack, okay, on the
Yeah,
safety
okay, that's that. And they call them entitlements, by the way.
yes, and by the way, what? No. They are entitlements.
Well, they are, but they've
You know
come
what
up with the word.
entitlements are? Entitlements are rights.
They are. They're right.
And
They
don't
are.
you let people take away your rights.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's what it's about. These people are trying to take away your rights, and they use the fancy word entitlements as if it has a negative connotation. They put a negative connotation on it. Let me tell you, it doesn't have a negative connotation, or should not have a negative
No, they are the rights that have been granted to
Right.
us
Yes.
through our government. Just like
Yes,
they've
and
made
those are rights
welfare.
we fought
Welfare.
for, and that our parents and grandparents got, and we should not let those rights be taken away from us that they fought so hard for.
Well, and that they are trying to benefit from now, right? I mean, I'm not on Social Security. I know you are, Joe, but I'm not a spring chicken anymore. Okay, but we're not on Social Security yet. But if they have their way, they will politicize this and twist it into oblivion. They'll make it a political no-no. They'll convince people, because nobody knows whether they're coming or going anymore, how this all works. And you'll get people who will say, well, because they believe the narratives, well, it's going, Social Security is going bankrupt. There's no such thing as the federal treasury going bankrupt. There's no such thing as Congress not being able to pass legislation unless you get these people who want to keep everybody in austerity and they want to keep you down. Why? Because who does that serve? Oh, that's right, the corporations, the donors. Here we are again. This is like some big this catch-22 we keep falling into. Just like they made welfare a terrible term. The preamble of the Constitution says, support the general welfare. What's the general welfare? Society? It's society. We are crushing ourselves. We are at like the fall of Rome. Here we are.
And we no longer remember what the social safety net was for. The social safety net arose during a depression because we had a depression. We
Yeah.
had the depression was because there was no social safety net. So
Exactly.
there was no preventing the economy from bottoming out during the 1930s. The Roosevelt administration put in the social safety net and it was expanded in future presidencies to place a floor on how far the economy could fall. And if
Right.
they take that away from us, then rather
Then
than
they
getting
know, inherently they know that that's where we're going to go. So
they
they are
know
willing to spin
inherently
us into
that's
that.
where we're going to go. But we have to know that instead of having only recessions,
Yeah.
we're going to have depressions like the 1930s, which never end and which get to 25% unemployment and 30% unemployment. Those kinds, okay, of shocking results. That's what happens when you don't have safety nets anymore, and they're trying to kill those particular safety nets for us. Okay, so I mean, I want to get back to what I was saying in the article because I think it's important. Uh, okay, uh, that means we are getting almost no net injection of new financial assets into the private economy to support growth. I could have said to support society. If we keep that up and do not blow a further financial bubble, then we will continue to have a stagnating economy with very likely growing inequality. Both of these crises can be ended by Congress and the executive branch. They're adopting alternative means of funding congressional appropriations, other than tax revenues and revenues from issuing and selling conventional interest bearing debt instruments. So both crises are political, not financial, okay, or economic. Both await nothing but the political will to implement a solution that will end them without austerity and without any economic pain. All we need is the courage of our convictions and a firm rejection of those voices, including the Peter G. Peterson Foundation uh, / Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget, the CRFB. Paul Ryan, Vice President elect Mike Pence. By the way, Mike Pence is going to run for the presidency himself in 2024. And
Is
a
that
number
what's going on? That makes sense now. His stupid crap he's spewing today about the
stupid
DOJ.
crap, yeah. Okay, and a number of centrist and supposedly progressive Democrats insisting that only through tax increases and spending cuts can we find fiscal salvation. The austerity advocates have been singing this song for decades now. It's come very near to ruining the Democratic Party. Let us firmly reject it now and sing a new song of deficit spending, greater equality, and real progress in repairing our economy and our society. Okay, so that was one of the two pieces I had. I'd like just for a minute or two to go into the final piece because I think that's kind of interesting too in the way that I frame that. Okay, and in the very title of that. So let me share it and get you to contemplate at least the title anyway, and a few of the things that I say there. Uh, Here we go. The title is The Defense Department is Running Out of Money Unless We Do Something About It.
Do you want to share this, Joe?
Yeah, I am sharing it right now. I'm adding it to the stream. It has that same picture again because that's the heading for all these posts here. It's on a website. Okay, the Defense Department is running out of money unless we do something. I did this December 17, 2016. Every day you hear or read on some network or website a claim of Social Security and Medicare running out of money, followed by an appeal to raise taxes or cut spending or both to stop that from happening. But why is it you almost never see or hear someone saying that the Defense Department is running out of money, followed by a similar appeal to raise taxes or cut spending to pay for it? Do you ever hear that about the Defense Department? The answer is obvious. It's that we expect to pay for defense spending, whatever its contribution to deficits every year with a new annual appropriation by Congress. There is little talk about running out of money for defense. We just expect that Congress will appropriate what it believes is needed, and we understand that its defense appropriation mandates the executive to spend the money appropriated. Why can't we do the same thing with Social Security and Medicare?
The answer is we can.
We can, but we haven't done that in the past. Instead, we've set up, quote, trust funds, unquote, which are actually accounting records of credits accumulated by the safety net programs viewed as U.S. Treasury securities. The credits are equal to the amount of the contributions paid for by wage earners plus bond interest income that's accumulated annually according to a rate specified by law. And that is added to the trust fund balances. At the end of 2015, the accumulated reserves in the two SS trust funds total 2.8 trillion. I don't know what they total now. They're probably a little less because we've been getting a little closer to the trust funds getting to zero. But even though I haven't looked up the exact amount in there right now, it's still in the trillions of dollars, everybody.
Yes, and we can explain why we're running low on that accounting record, so to speak, because what did we do? Oh, wait a minute. We privatized Medicaid and Medicare. What does that mean? That means that we allowed the insurance companies to underwrite insurance plans with funding from those trust funds to profit off of. Isn't that special?
Right, but those the
Without
money
giving
going,
people care and depleting the natural resource or the needed necessary resources to provide the benefit. It's so crystal clear.
right, but what they're doing is depleting the accounting record.
Yes,
They're not really depleting any money because there's no money in those trust funds.
right, exactly. But it is those accounting records that they utilize to project running out of money.
Right, and they don't acknowledge that the federal government is a monetary sovereign and create as much money as it wants, not only for the Defense Department, but for Social Security and Medicare too. For example,
And
one
healthcare,
way
right?
to solve the problem that we've been talking about is as Congress begins to approach the zeroing out of the trust funds, it could simply appropriate funds and it could add a sentence saying, take this appropriation and credit this Social Security appropriation to the trust funds.
Exactly.
And if Congress just had a little sentence to do that, it would always keep the trust fund solvent.
Correct.
Okay,
Right.
because it would just be adding the appropriation to the trust funds.
The only issue though, Joe, and let's go back to Greenspan, and I can't believe that he was right on this because I don't like to give credit to people who are actual ghouls when it comes to putting people down.
Oh, but
However,
he was completely right about that. He knew that the money was created by keystrokes. He knew that.
True, but he hit the nail on the head, and let's just tie this all back. Your health care may be paid for by your Medicare and Medicaid benefit, right? Your Social Security benefit, correct? However, if you decimate the infrastructure of healthcare delivery, which is what is happening, then you don't have the resources for people to consume the benefit for which there is money to pay.
But that's my point. Okay, that when they talk about depleting the resources, what they're talking about is depleting the accounting record of the trust fund. Okay, and what I'm saying is that depleting the accounting record of the trust fund does not have to mean anything if we just keep appropriating and keep adding funds to the trust fund.
Okay, but why would you use the word resources then? Because when you use the word resources to me, I'm talking about the resources that it is required so that someone can consume their health care. And that's what this is all about.
Uh, that's what was said in Greenspan's answer to Ryan. He was completely right about that. In other words, okay, it ultimately is not the amount of funds that count, okay, but it's whether those funds can be absorbed by the resources we have.
Right.
If the privatization that is going on right now is ruining the real resources, okay,
Yes.
because let's say it's driving people away from serving the healthcare industry.
Or it's having private equity snatch up hospitals, shutting them down and selling the real estate, right?
Exactly, right,
Yeah.
exactly. If the real resources are depleted in that way, yes, that, okay, is real damage.
Yeah. Well, we got a lot of it.
Yep, we got it. Social Security, the Social Security Administration projects that the OASI and the DI trust funds will together have enough credits to facilitate full payments till 2024. It also projects that the hospital insurance fund will have enough credits to facilitate full payments until 2028. So notice those were the same numbers Stephanie was using in 2022, which is kind of interesting because that means that the so-called solvency situation hasn't gotten any worse between 2017 and 2022. I find that a little interesting. The fourth fund, the Supplementary Medical Insurance Fund, is projected to never run out of credits because, as the Social Security Administration says, the actuarial balance is not an informative concept for the SMI program because federal law sets premium increases and general revenue transfers at the levels necessary to bring the SMI into an annual balance. Okay, in other words, it's what Stephanie said. Because the SMI can draw on general revenues, it always has to be brought into balance. It will always be brought into balance. So the actuarial balance is not an informative concept for it.
Right. I mean, it's basically subterfuge. They
Yeah.
spin it as a political narrative.
And a subterfuge spun as a political marriage. That is exactly right. Okay, it's a political illusion. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
it's a subterfuge. Okay, and it's spun as a financial narrative. It's a false financial narrative.
Yeah, it's street speak.
I point out here that in this respect, however, SMI is better off than defense since federal law, barring repeal by Congress, requires that the SMI be brought into an annual balance with the accounting projections for the program, whereas the Defense Department can occasionally undergo cuts, as we saw recently during the sequester shenanigans, that were going on in 2012, 2013, 2014. The
They haven't repealed them.
oh yeah, they eventually repealed them, but for those
Not
years,
all of them, did they?
I don't know if they have repealed all of them, but the point is uh, that during like 2013 and 2014, okay, the Defense Department had to undergo real cuts for those years because of the silly sequester.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, so did every Medicare provider who billed Medicare, every medical provider. We had to take it in the shorts at 2% off the top for years. Years and years.
Absolutely. Okay, so I think that really does it. I don't think I have to go through any more of this. I give credit to Stephanie Kelton here. I said, so as Stephanie Kelton says in a fine earlier post to which this one owes much, the difference between the SMI and the other three funds in terms of supposed unsustainability is not economic or financial, but is due to a choice of Congress to commit to payment of the full SMI benefits indefinitely while it hasn't yet made that commitment to the OASI, the DI, and the HI. Okay, remember again, the HI is the Hospital Insurance Fund. In short, it is a political choice only, and it has nothing to do with the U.S. government actually running out of money unless Congress refuses to appropriate any coming shortfalls. Okay, so I wrote these two things in 2017. Okay, I think these two pieces are pretty
And they
similar.
resonate with a bigger audience, and that audience might have more understanding now, Joe, than then.
Yes, I think so. But also the point is that it's so close to Stephanie's point of view in these three articles. But I think some of the framing is striking, like contemplating, the Defense Department running out of money, and us having to do something to stop that. We never think.
They do something. They do something. They pass a ridiculous defense budget every other week now.
They're always doing something, right?
Yeah, sure. And everybody just like, oh, okay, whatever. Another billion yesterday.
Right. Okay. Or another 55 billion for Ukraine. Yes. No problem at all.
Yeah, the war we're losing that they haven't clued the American public in on the fact that we're losing it yet.
But if they put in 55 billion for Ukraine, how much are they going to give to Taiwan?
I don't know, but you know what I saw today? I saw, instead of Russian affiliated news network, I saw a deleted tweet pegged, or not deleted, but a tweet pegged China affiliated news network or news, whatever. So, HR 5181 is coming into full swing. Oh, and they tagged Chris Hedges, the one that they've been tagging as a Russian news affiliate. He's now a China news affiliate. It's hilarious. I mean, it is so ridiculous.
It is ridiculous. It is truly ridiculous.
It's just like, oh my God. Do you see yourself? You obviously don't see yourself. You couldn't possibly see yourself.
Okay. So one final word about the trip, okay, of Nancy Pelosi to Taiwan. Before Nancy Pelosi's trip, there was a speech by Xi, having nothing to do with that trip, which announced the plans, okay, of the Chinese to complete, okay, a reunification with Taiwan by 2049.
Oh, gee. Okay, so it's going to happen next week or sometime imminent, right?
If it happens next week or next month, okay,
or even next year,
next year, that's going to be the fault of Nancy Pelosi. She speeded up. She speeded up that plan of Xi's, by hinting very, very strongly that Taiwan is independent and we're changing the one China policy in a unilateral way. And we are going to support Taiwan in its quest for independence, something we have never done since the recognition of China during the 1970s, since the Nixon administration. We've never recognized that. And the effect of Nancy Pelosi doing that is likely to speed up the Chinese calendar for reunification with Taiwan to, I don't know, could happen next month. We weren't kidding.
Well, and let's just be honest about this.
For the Chinese to conquer Taiwan.
If Biden was really so against her going, he would have been, the whole administration, including the Secretary of State, would have been doing damage control, of which we heard not one peep. Okay? So let's just be clear here. I mean, it's gross. It's gross.
Yes, okay, it is gross. tomorrow night. Okay, I was thinking of talking some China. Okay, are you up for that?
Yeah, sure. What do you want to do? There's a lot that has happened that they don't report any of this here in the US. But there are so many pieces to this puzzle. There were so many um, negotiations that people weren't coming to, uh, reports from Turkey and China and uh, Mexico and India and a lot of other countries about what what this bipolar unipolar world is going to look like, and BRICS and all of that all fits into this, right? I mean,
Right. And
basically, the U.S. is really angry that they're not the superpower, and unipolar. We don't live in a unipolar world anymore. I mean, that has come crashing down now.
right. And our foreign policy establishment is hanging on. They are not going to let go. They don't want to let go.
Brzezinski is dead.
No,
Long live Brzezinski.
right. And this is so important because we have no power to stop the Chinese from taking over Taiwan. So, okay, if they attempt to do that, what that's going to reveal is that we're simply out of our league. When we're close to the mainland, okay, of Asia, we don't have the power to enforce our will.
I don't know, Joe. I think they'll send lots of young men and women off to war, and they'll try to prove that they can do it anyway. And I'll tell you what.
I don't know if they're going to do that, but I don't know what exactly material they're going to use. They
Well, they did it in Vietnam. There was no way they were going to win, and they lied to the American people and kept doing it and doing it and doing it. Why wouldn't they do it now?
well, because the reality was that we did not know at that time that we could not do it. In Vietnam, okay, it looked like it was the kind of war we could win with superior arms. We drafted a lot of people. Okay, we had a very large army there. It was well armed. We didn't understand exactly what the guerrilla fighters could do, and but now we have a different base of knowledge.
You think we did Afghanistan stupid too?
We did Afghanistan stupid too, but this kind of stupid, this China stupid, is sending our aircraft carriers up against a strong missile defense that can easily sink the aircraft carriers, that can neutralize our naval power, which in turn is much of our air power. In just a few days, we now have a very small standing army, actually. It's
Right.
throughout the whole world. But what is it roughly? Maybe 1.4 million spread. I mean, we can't commit any more than 200,000 people, to defense of Taiwan. And the Chinese just going to overwhelm us, completely overwhelm us. We don't have any.
Then, Joe, why in God's name did we do this? If we can't fight this war,
I cannot offer a rational explanation. There have been plenty of discussions, okay, on YouTube for the last 6 months, looking at the different components, okay, of power and coming
well,
up.
I mean, we're talking about practicality. You are talking about the articles that we read together. I know exactly what you're talking about. We went through Scott's article we both read it at the same time, not together. But the point that I'm trying to make, Joe, is that I don't see how, first, there is something that we are missing here. Unless they're willing to go into nuclear war.
Okay, I think with respect to sending Nancy Pelosi over there, that there's a strong aspect of incompetence in that particular decision. I think that maybe we don't realize that even though Nancy Pelosi can still count votes, okay, and even though
My son can count to 438 too, but go ahead.
right, okay, and even though she can put the fear of God into other Congress people, because in that sphere, she's very powerful. She has her structure, she has her allies, and she has the ability to count those votes. And see, so we still see her, or some of us do anyway, as very competent, on a day-to-day basis. However, when you're talking about competence in foreign policy or competence to weigh the capabilities of various countries, she has none of that.
Well, but
She
she
does
did not act on her own. I don't believe that for 30 seconds.
Okay, I'm not saying that she went there on her own. Okay, but I am saying that she did want to go there. She thought that she could somehow start something there that was going to help. Okay, I'm not saying the Biden administration didn't consent to her going there. I'm not saying that part of the foreign policy establishment didn't want to see her start something, but I'm saying she herself did not know what the hell she was doing. I'm sure she had no idea that this might lead to the conquest of Taiwan within a couple of months.
Dave.
Well,
I mean, seriously.
yeah, I mean,
What she did, I
days.
mean, and now they're sanctioning her. So yeah, you're right. She was ignorant. She had no idea, because I'm certain that she never thought that they would do what they're doing. I mean, they're sanctioning her personally.
You're right, and she probably had no thought that they could do that to her.
Again, this is why we need another Speaker of the House.
Yes.
Now.
And this is why we need another foreign policy establishment too.
Oh yeah, well we have
This
to.
foreign policy establishment does not know what it's doing. The war, okay, in Ukraine, they provoked that war continuously over a period of years, kept on provoking it, and provoking it, misunderstanding the real power that Russia had, thinking that Russia was a second-rate power, even though they still have the nuclear capability and they still have all of those materials, all of those real resources. They still insisted on thinking that Russia was a second-rate power and had no place at the table, and they could do anything with Russia they wanted. They could push Russia around. They didn't understand the capabilities of Russia. They didn't understand the full dimensions of the cooperation of Russia and China.
I think what they didn't understand is how disrespected everybody felt. And when I say everybody, I'm talking most of the world, if not, even our allies.
Yeah,
okay?
How disrespected they feel.
Yeah.
By the United States, that they're disrespected by the United States, and that there's underlying anger there. And
well, they don't believe that they can trust anything that they're told. They can't trust anything they're told. And they're coming right out and saying it.
Yep.
So, I mean, again, hubris, time to pass the torch. I don't think that you understand what you're playing with. It's kind of like when you are sitting on Capitol Hill for so long that you don't drive a car, you don't dial a telephone, you never go anywhere, you have security detail, and you've been doing this for 40 some years, you kind of forget that you don't even know how to go out and touch grass, right? And then you get a regime in place. I mean, Blinken was like the worst. He is the worst. I mean, even his presence is horrible.
I know.
You need a Secretary of State that commands some respect. He looks like a deer in the headlights all the time. He's like a frat boy that's got a hangover.
Yeah,
He's
I
all
know.
edgy and just kind of like you can see it on his face. Terrible. It's optics. It's like casting a movie, for God's sake. I mean, let's just go that far. Just get some damn people in there that command some respect. And whatever this messaging lack thereof is, whoever's putting that together. I mean, this is a disaster. And it's been a disaster from day one.
Okay, so let's continue this discussion tomorrow.
Yes, let's, because it's 11:06. I need to go. But this has been really good. And Stephanie is amazing. And she's coming out swinging lately. I love the straight talk without, here's what it is. It's beautiful. It's a beautiful thing. I just hope that we can get it out there and people are socializing that. We should be tweeting that stuff out for the next week, 3 times a day. Everybody we know that's watching this and affiliated with us, we should just keep it going.
We should. Absolutely. Okay, so good night.
Good
And
night,
thank you for
everybody.
this program. Thank you all for coming, by the way. And thank you for staying. And we will see you tomorrow. Oh, and by the way, but please don't forget the Patreon account, the Buy Me a Coffee account.
You don't have your ticker running, Joe.
For Kerberos, yes, I did not have my ticker running tonight. I'm not
You
sure.
run it tomorrow. I'll make sure to remind you.
Okay, I will run it tomorrow. And please do share, like, and subscribe. And we'll see you tomorrow for some foreign policy.
Bye, everybody.
Okay, good night.
Good night, Joe. Good night, Bonnie. Hello, Bonnie.
Good night.
Good night.
Yes, Sandy, have a great night. And China, Russia single-handedly win, and we say, why not both? Since it's Jesus, I call them idiots. Okay.